to order. This is a special council meeting to deal with a time-sensitive grant application. It had been on the agenda for Monday night's meeting. Being that we have to give at least 24 hours notice to a meeting, we figured that we had to get this meeting in for this purpose, or the grant application wouldn't be able to be in time. So that's the reason we're going ahead with this special council meeting. Donna, do you want to take over as the...
For sure. Okay, so council had received their copies of the draft plan on December the 20th. First off, I wanted to just back up for a second and thank you all for coming out on such a stormy week that we've been having this week. So, but anyway, we had sent your draft plans out to you about December the 20th, and so I actually printed you a hard copy though to be able to take a look at. We're just going to focus on the main two summary pages of the plan. I realize it is an 85-page plan. So we are just going to focus on the two highlight pages in there. So as you know, we've been talking about asset management plans for the last couple of years, and this is phase one of that plan, and it was completed in December as we were required to do. As Neil pointed out, the only reason for the urgency of the meeting today is really a good news story because, as you know, we were successful to be able to submit an application for the M3 capital funding for the Mill Street project in Blythe. And that application is due on Friday. And one of the requirements of that is that your asset management plan has to accompany, along with all the other documents, that application form. So that's the reason that we're actually meeting before Friday and to address the plan for sure. So this is a bit of an exception to our normal process on that. Having said that as well, although we have been successful in being invited to participate in round two for the Mill Street project, there's still no guarantees. This is our third time we've put an application in for that project. So hopefully 3 times a charm and we'll be successful on actually receiving the money this time. But anyways, even with our plan attached and all the other documents that the staff have been working on, there's still no guarantees that we're going to get this money. For all those that weren't eligible to submit this application for funding, then the guideline there is actually no guideline for when they have to submit their plans. And I set on your desk a copy of a memo that has come out from the Ontario Good Roads Association, just so that you can refer to it, because it specifically outlines that the province isn't requiring municipalities to submit their plans at this time. However, if you were invited to send in an application under the capital funding program, then it had to go in with that. So for all the other municipalities that haven't made it to round two or chose not to submit, they may not be dealing with their plans for another month or whenever they have them ready. Also, will be interesting, as you can tell in that Good Roads memo, it says that the province will be giving feedback on the applications, and you can only assume that the asset management plan, which is part of the application, that they'll be providing comments on that as well. So again, we have hired outside sources to actually compile the template of our document, and that was through Citywide, and they completed between 80 and 100 plans for municipalities of various sizes across the province. So we were fortunate enough to be able to have them help us with our plan, but it still was an incredible amount of work for all the staff to be able to review the data, prepare the data, submit it all in, and get all the numbers and information that they needed. So it's been quite a long process for sure. So I want to talk a about the report, the contents of this report. And again, this is, in this context, we're looking at phase 1. And the phase 1 replacement cost of all our linear assets is 141.6 million, which you will see in the report. We've ended up with a cumulative grade of a D, which is not unexpected, and that we're going to look at that in a little bit more detail on page 46. Also, this report, since it was a new requirement that came out in 2012, it's strictly based on our spending habits of 2012. So in that respect, it really doesn't reflect an average or a past history of what we've been doing. Because as you know, for the past few years, we've actually been concentrating on equipment replacement and buildings rather than the replacement of linear assets. So we have, what it's come up with is an annual infrastructure deficit of about 2.5 million, with the bulk of that being in roads. And again, that's what we expected, somewhere around that number to be. Phase 2, which will be ongoing for the rest of 2014, will also add about another $30 to $50 million in replacement costs for our assets. So when all is said and done, we will be fairly close to having $200 million worth of assets as a replacement cost. So in phase 2, it's going to add the buildings, vehicles, machinery and equipment, and land improvements. And where we have such a wide variance there is, for example, on all the historical buildings that we have. For example, on this building, our insurance value, I think, is about $8 million, where by using construction costs, it would only be about $5 million. And then you'd have to actually, once we start looking at these on an individual basis, you'd have to actually determine and make the assumption you can't actually even replace a building like this. So you would have to work that into the equation as well. So there's a lot with the buildings that are not as straightforward as a cost per foot, and that will come with our next round for sure. And again, the guide which was put out by the province, which we were following in order to prepare this plan, said that it had to be for a minimum of a 10-year plan. Well, as we know, a 10-year plan is really not going to be feasible, but it is a starting place, and to meet the requirements as set out there, that's what this covers, is a 10-year plan. But we'll certainly be looking at that and adjusting a lot of those that act to end of life more so rather than in 10 years. In 10 years, if the asset isn't at its end of life, there's no way we could afford or would we want to replace it. So those are some of the things we're going to come up over the next few years. Also, in phase 2, after we have a really good look at phase 2, our next steps really will be to incorporate the phase 2 assets, review the inventory, and include the wider range of assets that are not currently included in this plan. So some of those examples would be, we had a threshold, we had various thresholds. So say, for example, we had a $5,000 thresholds for computers and those types of things. Well, we only can replace one computer at a time at, say, $1,000 roughly. So those computers as a one-off are not included in our plan. But when you look at them cumulatively, and you had to replace every computer in the whole municipality, then we'd have to take a look in phase 2 of coming up with replacement costs for all the computers. And again, street lights was in on that, and there was a couple of other items as well. But those were two of the bigger ones that will be part of phase 2. The other thing that we need to do is establish components and break down all of our assets into components. So the base that we were working with was the PSAB base, which came out in 2009. So for example, the roads were basically taken as one asset, and so were the bridges. Well, as we know, on the bridges, there's several components, the deck, the railing, etc. So what we will be doing over the next couple of years, and you don't sometimes replace the whole structure, sometimes you only replace a piece of the structure. And especially when we get into the building part of it, right now our buildings, for the first exercise that we went through in 2009, each building was valued at their historical cost as one component. Well, often, as you know, we replace the roof in a much less time span than the whole building itself, or the HVAC system or something like that. So we'll be determining through that exercise whether we break the buildings down into, it would be no more than 4 pieces, but probably 3 to 4 pieces, with the roof being one, probably mechanical being another one, in the structure. So that's the kind of work that we still are going to be contemplating over the next little while. The staff have done a great job where they can of evaluating the condition of the assets. So Don and his fellows have been doing a lot of camera work on the sewers, and so all the information that we had to date has been recorded in the plan, but we didn't have it all done, of course, and so as we get new information on that, we'll be recording the new conditions. And also, I think Kelly is having, contemplating about having a roads needs study updated again in 2014, which will update the condition of our roads. We've already agreed to having a water and sewer rate study completed, and Kelly just got his bridge condition report done in 2013 after we had our plan done. So again, this is going to be a living document. All this new information will be adding to the document to bring it up to date as much as possible, but it's going to be changing constantly. So once phase 2 is completed, we'll devote time to establish a reasonable strategy on how to tackle the replacement cost and time and the condition and some of the other components that are required to move towards sustainability. And of course, our future funding needs, that's the whole crux of it, and that's our goal, is to be able to come up with ways in the future how to finance our assets and to make sure that we have funds available when it comes time for the end of their life, and what's the best use of them at the end of their life, and whether they actually should be replaced or not. So the plan likely won't have a lot of impact on the 2014 budget, because we are working through our first stages of our draft budget now. But it will certainly be one of the main tools for our priority setting as we move forward into the next few years. And as I said, this is an 85-page report, which had been condensed into a summary. And there's been no real surprises in the report. So I was speaking with Jim there for a few minutes before we started. I've been preparing you for what the numbers would be, and so there is no shock really in what they've come out at. It's just a matter of now, over the next how many years are we going to be able to deal with these costs. But we certainly needed to get our hands on some real live reasonable data to be able to even come up with a plan. So that was a good starting point for sure. So for a minute, I'd like you to just take a peek at page 4, the executive summary of your plan. And what that does is just breaks down that $141.6 million in replacement costs that I talked to you about. So it just goes through it and says that the storm sewers, the value there is $15.4 million, or 11% of our total linear assets. The road network is at $35.7 million, or a quarter of our assets. Bridges and culverts just over $8 million, or 6%. The water network at $36.9 million, or 26%. And the sanitary sewer system at $45.4 million. So as you can see, that's how the $141 million in replacement costs is divided out into each of those asset categories. So also I wanted you to flip to page 46, which is basically the infrastructure report card. And as I mentioned to you at the beginning of the meeting, our cumulative grade there is a D, which again is not surprising. So that's made up of various things, and the asset categories are listed there. So for our road network on condition versus performance, we have a B. For bridges and culverts, we have a C+. For the water network, a B+, sanitary sewer, C+, and the storm sewer, B+. But where we are receiving an F on all our reports is basically the funding, because as we know, we haven't been putting away enough money, or basically any money in a lot of cases, to be able to meet these replacement costs in the future. So if you look at that, what this really tells us that, and in the comments there, overall the municipality's road network is in fair to excellent condition, but we should be setting aside about $1.4 million to plan to replace it all. So we have quite a ways to go there, because based on just last year's spending, we only spent about $79,000 on the roads network, because as you remember, now that's excluding Josephine Street, but we spent a lot of money on equipment last year in particular. So bridges and culverts, actually, again, they're in fair to excellent condition, and we should be spending about $100,000 a year on their replacement, and they haven't actually had any work done them or needed any work done on them, so on the last couple of years. So again, on a go-forward basis, we have to work at componentizing the bridges and then coming up with a strategy on how to start putting away that $8 million, so that when all those bridges need work or need replaced, that we have some of that money set aside. Again, on the water mains and their facilities are, again, some are in fair, but a lot are in excellent condition there. Now, both water and sewer, as you know, with our $10 a month that we've been putting away since 2009, that certainly has helped, and it has reduced the funding deficit required on both of those. Now, we're going to undertake that new study again in 2014, and that will tell us how close we are on par to be able to meet our goals when the end of the life of these assets come in. And storm sewer is the last one, so again, they are in fair to excellent condition depending where they are, and we should be putting away about $225,000 to replace the storm sewer network. So as we work through, this is really very, very preliminary for us, although it does cover 80% of our assets are linear, where the buildings, machinery, and equipment, and vehicles and such are really only about 20% of our total. Now, as I said, the citywide did about 80 to 100 municipalities, and so this is a template. They all have the same basic 85 pages. They've all gone through the same exercise. It's just their grades and data and kilometers of road, and if they didn't have water systems and those types of things, then obviously it wouldn't be in here. So, but the template is the same, so the province will be seeing quite similar reports going in. Just to take a moment on the report, though, they have done a really good job, I think, of going through it. A lot of it is the theory from what the province was asking us to do and to complete, and so they've dealt with all of that in a lot of detail. But it certainly is an interesting exercise for us, and as I said, it's just the beginning, and it's going to be certainly something, a very useful document in the new year for sure. So in the plan, just to go over what had to be in here, you had to have an executive summary, an introduction, the state of the local infrastructure, which the main thing was the replacement cost valuation, the condition, and the useful life. You had to put in expected levels of service. You had to have an asset management strategy for replacement, maintenance, and disposal, and a financing strategy. So we've met all the minimum conditions as laid out in that booklet. And it'll be interesting, as I said, to see what sort of comments and feedback we get from the province, where others probably won't get any, because it'll only be the ones that are submitting these plans in hopes to receive capital infrastructure money. So another requirement is, in order to make us complete these plans, of course, the province had given us funding to do that, so that's how we were able to pay for the plans. So the actual completion of the plan was about $20,000, and then we spent about the first $20,000 that we got on buying the software, which is what we're going to need from now on to be able to run different scenarios and look at individual streets and individual assets. So it'll be something that the department heads and managers will be using from now on in great depth. And of course they need a lot of training on that, so that's also part of our work that we have to do in 2014 and beyond. So another requirement also is that we have to have this plan posted on our website by May of 2014. So we have lots of time to get it posted. We actually hope to have it posted either by the end of the month or by the first of the next month for sure, depending on what happens with our infrastructure application. Since the two of them are linked, we may wait and see if there's any feedback comes back from the province on the elements of our plan before we post it. But, so anyway, that is a brief overview of the plan, and so there's many components of it, and as I said, it's going to be a good working tool for us from here on in. And although the ink is barely dry on it, we'll be making changes to it from now on, because as we change assets, replace assets, get better data on their condition, all of those types of things will be incorporated and updated into this plan on an ongoing basis. So you've had a couple of weeks to take a look at this plan, and I've gone over the highlights of it as well. So was there any specific questions that anybody had?
Brock?
Yeah, I have. I found this a pretty scary document. The first few pages, you wonder what kind of world we're getting into. But looking at the whole package, I'm very optimistic about the value of it. I was under the impression that when this is submitted, we're going to get feedback on it. So I was sort of assuming that this would be a draft until we get feedback from them, and then we'll get the official.
No, not necessarily so, because as I said, most of the municipalities, any of the municipalities that aren't applying for this funding this particular week aren't sending them in any.
I realize that, yeah.
Yeah, so
so this will be our if we approve it, it's
yeah.
The final document.
Final document, as I said, but only until we update it
right.
within the next short while. But yes, this is certainly our starting point document.
Archie, did you have a comment?
I just wanted to say, I think it's going to be a very valuable document. At first, like Councillor Bodden, I was a little taken aback by some of the numbers, but I think in the most part, looking at the current condition, actually, I was pleasantly surprised for the most part. that the infrastructure is in generally, in most parts, in decent condition. And I guess my question to Donna is, how will the province utilize this information? Because both AMO and municipalities all across the province have been saying for over 15, 20 years that there's a significant infrastructure deficit all across the province for municipal infrastructure. Are they going to utilize this to assist in helping the lower tier municipalities funding these deficits?
My crystal ball is cloudy today. I honestly, Archie, we've asked that question many times and would really have had no answer. I think the thing will be is until these numbers start rolling in and they start adding them up to see what we've talked about infrastructure deficits for years, but you weren't able to put a number on it. Now that at least we have a number such that it is to start with, I don't know that the province had any idea, what they were up against and what we were up against. So we fear that they will. The fear always has been is that. They'll make us go through all this, which is a good business sense anyway, because I mean that's how you run a business. You plan to replace your assets either in the current form that they are or in something better when at the end of their life. But the fear always is that by us putting money into reserves to be able to do that, is that then they will be able to say, well, we don't need to give you any more capital money because you have the money put away. So that's been asked at almost every meeting, but there's really.
But I think it's fair to say too that all municipalities, not just ours, are having the same fiscal difficulties that everybody else across the province is with this, and the likelihood of maybe, in any kind of a total sense of putting those kinds of funds aside is really unrealistic. I mean, it'd be very difficult for any municipality to do. And so hopefully the province will have to look at that and do some long-term planning. I did wonder also if Donna, through you, Your Worship, to Donna, if there had been any discussion about benchmarking with the asset management plans across the province, just so that municipalities can see how we are compared to some others.
I haven't really seen anything how they're going to do that because, as I was saying, nobody is really going to see a lot. Like all the municipalities don't have to send it in at this time. So eventually, I would expect that's something that will come out of it, but at this particular time, no.
That I'm going to make a comment at this time. Basically, it's taking it from a cash system to an amortizing system, and that while a number of farms do it, the numbers bowl people over when they start looking at it. This is something that's going to take a certain amount of time, because there's a lot of municipalities have those major things that they're going to be paying for a number of years behind, and for them to automatically start putting in enough for replacement cost, there's going to have to be a lot of look at it from both upper tiers of government as to whether something like this, we have a better idea of the assets, and we can probably pick and choose better if we have to say, okay, there's this we can't afford anymore, or that this will give us good numbers on it. So I think it's an excellent exercise in knowing what we may have to be doing in infrastructure in the future for us to get from basically cash income tax to full amortization. It's going to take a little bit of time. Is that an analogy?
Well, to full replacement cost.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly. And sorry, go ahead.
Well, just to follow up on Councillor McGowan's comments about the funding, I've been encouraged by what I've been seeing and hearing from province with respect to a permanent, stable source of infrastructure funding. Any interviews I've read with Minister Leal, the Minister of Rural Affairs, and Premier Wynne, I think the province would like to have a permanent source of infrastructure funding for municipalities. So I'm encouraged by that, and perhaps the Reeve and myself and others will get more information at the upcoming Roma Good Roads Convention in late February. So I think we'll see what happens there. I think we can also expect an announcement from the Fed sometime this spring where they're going to renew the Building Canada Fund for the next 5 years. And that isn't going to address all of our issues in the asset management plan, but through a stable source of funding federally and perhaps a permanent source of funding provincially, well, that's going to help us deal with some of the infrastructure deficit that we have. But as you pointed out, Donna, it's prudent for us to start putting money aside annually to address the deficit.
Rob?
The other thing, well, I guess this is just carrying on from what the Reeve and Gary were saying. It's really, what's really attractive is the situation, if all of this works out, where you cover all of your future requirements and you've got the level field, and when you have to make major purchases and spend huge amounts of money on special projects, you've got the money, so you don't have to do as much borrowing. And I think that's a great potential for saving in the future, in the long run. What I am concerned about is what's missing from this, in that we all know that we cannot pay for everything that we do out of the property tax, and so there has to be something coming from the higher levels of government, and we don't really know how they're going to handle that. So I would like to have seen a little more about what they're going to do with the information, and I know they don't want to pin us down, but not themselves.
Dave?
How does the, first of all, I think this is a great report, but how does it affect growth on new assets like water and sewer lines and new roads and so on? How does that fit into the equation that is demonstrated here?
Well, as I said, we'll be constantly updating, and so if we happen to run a new water line somewhere, then what you would do is you would take off, if there was remaining value left on the old one, you would have to dispose of that and then record the new asset at its new useful life and new replacement costs. So, as I said, each time we improve something, buy something, change something, we'll have several transactions that we have to take a look at.
Supplementary. What happens, or where we have water and sewer lines into an adjoining municipality? Is that part of our asset, or is that part of the other municipality?
We've tossed that around, but if we own it and maintain it, then it still is part of our system, so it would be recorded in our assets.
Thank you.
Okay.
So Donna, what do you require council in terms of a motion?
Yes, so in order to send, and it seems funny that one is tied to the other, but that's the way it is that in order to be able to submit this application for the Mill Street project, we have to send in an asset management plan that's been adopted by council. So the first motion that I was looking for is a motion from council to accept the asset management plan for 2013 for the township of North Huron as presented.
Biden and Bailey? Any further discussion? All in favor? Carried.
Okay. And then the second one, we're not actually required to send another motion in with the funding application, but we have had it happen before where they've told us they don't need a motion and then come back to us after and said that we do. So what I would like to do is, since we're here anyway, is to get a motion authorizing the submission of the application under the Small Rural and Northern Municipal Infrastructure Capital Program for the Mill Street project, which includes our asset management plan.
Reach and Campbell. Any discussion? All in favor? Carried.
So just a couple of last comments. Some of the other benefits of this plan will be is when we take a look at it for department heads and such on an individual project basis, it will give us priorities for the year. So it will take, for example, it will take some of the political decision making perhaps out of the equation, because it will take and rate the, say on a particular block, it would rate the all the underground infrastructure, the condition of the sanitary, the storm and the water, and then along with the sidewalk and the condition of the asphalt and all of that, and come up with which is the, you know, the worst case scenario. So that's where that, you know, that particular block would be the focus for, you know, the next year and that type of thing. So it's something that's going to be very useful in that respect, to be able to look at you know, not just the road surface, but you look at everything else. And there's the factors that are also included are things like risk. So any of the water mains and such that feeds the schools and the hospital and such have a higher risk and a higher consequence if they fail. So again, all of that is worked into the scenario to determine the priorities. So anyway, we will make sure this gets sent in with our application on tomorrow, if all goes well, so that we can have at least get confirmation back from them that they have received our application. Now we're still looking for a letter in the morning from Burnside, so that's the last piece to go in the package. So other than that, we hope that we're very successful on this Mill Street application, and you'll be seeing this plan for the rest of your life.
Ray?
One question, Don, and I suppose maybe you can't answer this even, but when might we hear back whether we're successful or not? Are we looking at months?
We have to know, oh no, we have to know by February. They didn't give us a date in February, but they've guaranteed that we'll know by the end of February if we're successful on that Mill Street job.
By going through this exercise and having the program of evaluating the assets, I think we'll have less surprises as a council, and that there'll be better planning as to when things are renovated, replaced, or eliminated. So that I think in the long run, it's a lot of work, but I think it's going to be something that will make councils make better decisions.
For sure.
Brock?
I'd just like to thank Donna for all the work, excuse me, tremendous amount of work over the last weeks and months preparing this, and done an excellent job.
Okay, thank you. I had lots of help from everybody. I had new best friends in public works and utilities. And, so anyway, thank you.
Is there anything else councillors have to bring before this meeting? Ask for a motion for adjournment then. Hallahan and Vaughn, or did you have something?
I was wondering if the gallery wants to make any comments on that. Any questions from the gallery on exactly, so that
Will the plan be updated as the assets change? In the year?
it will be a living plan. It will have to be updated and updated and updated as everything happens.
An annual review asked for.
Yeah.
Okay. but not on an annual basis?
Well, it depends on what happens. Normally, I would think twice a year is probably about all we can manage. Depending on what the project is. When we were doing Josephine Street, for example, that involved like the whole street, so we had to update the storm water sanitary block by block by block, because each one, how our IDs are set up is each block has its own specific ID, and then each asset on that block has an ID number as well. So we had to delete the existing 4-inch main out of the system, then enter the new bigger main into the system piece by piece by piece. So it depends what we get into. If we have a year where we're focused on equipment again, it's pretty easy just to add a new truck in. But it's these infrastructure ones that have all the layers that is very time consuming. But semi-annually would be our goal.
Great.
Trevor, did you have?
Yeah, no, I actually just wanted a couple of questions. So this plan is over 10 years. Is that the way it was intended to be?
The booklet requires you to use a 10-year time frame. But a 10-year time frame is really not reasonable or feasible for someone our size. So for now, we have done it on a 10-year plan, and the numbers are what we expected them to be.
So the numbers are based on a 10-year plan?
Yes.
Okay. So the underfunded amount, the $250 million or whatever that number was,
Yeah.
that's based on complete replacement if you replaced it today,
Right.
not piece by piece. So one of the reasons why I'm commenting on this is that sure, the $250 million seems like a lot, but if you break that over 10 years, even 25 million is a lot, but piece by piece is more manageable than, you're never going to replace the entire section of, or the whole water system or whatever. So I think that's important to notice, like to at least that be commended to understand that that's not, we have to know that number, but it's not realistic to do that.
That's right.
So spending in that unfunded, is spending on that asset and actually the reserves, is that combined? So for example, I'm saying, if you did an upgrade to the building here, let's just say you were doing an upgrade to the building in an annual year, but not a huge capital investment, just say paint or whatever the case may be. Whatever you spend on that year plus the reserves, is that adding up to the amount spent in order to understand what that unfunded is? Or is it just what you're putting in reserves?
It depends. What the example that you gave, paint, really wouldn't extend the life. That would be more of an operating cost. But if we were to replace the windows, which would be significant, it would be that plus the reserves. It depends on.
But if it's something to extend the life of the asset, then yes, it's spending plus. So not necessarily. So, and this assumption is based on 2012 data. Is that what I understood too? Mm-hmm. So again, you're like you said, Don. It's not averaging. It's not looking at anything. If we spent nothing, then we're going to see that unfunded issue. So I would be surprised if we were that far off if you took the average of what you spend from a sheer trend to be that unfunded. So I like the document. I like forward thinking. Like we need to start being more forward thinking. This comes back to the question that Deputy Reach asked about assets within other municipalities that are owned by us. In our agreements with those municipalities, is there something in the agreement that states that they are to help with the funding of the replacement of those assets, whether it be in their cost and transfer fees or something to that effect? Because if that's not the case, I'm struggling with that. We're giving them something for free.
Exactly.
So that's my question. Is there something in there?
That's why I asked.
There is a provision in the current cross-border services agreement between North Huron and Morris Turnberry, which stipulates that Morris Turnberry would be responsible for paying their proportionate share of a water or sewer replacement.
So that would be at the time of the replacement?
That's correct.
Okay. So that's, the next question I had was, so Donna, the assumption I heard out of this was work would be done on a priority basis, not necessarily based on cost. Or would it be kind of a combination of both?
It would be both. It would still be, you still have to look at what makes sense. So, as I said, each asset will have a score or a rating, but we'll be trying to look at things. I think we've done very well in the past looking at the whole block underground and above ground. You know, there were years ago where you did see, not here, but where they would pave and then, you know, a year or two later rip it all back up again and replace the infrastructure down below. So this is another way of ensuring that sort of thing doesn't happen. But again, who knows, you could have some wild spring come up and
Sure.
deteriorate or something like that. So it's going to give us our basis all the time, but you still have to work in environmental factors and other factors that are sort of unknown at this time.
And the assessment that we did on our linear assets, so the bridge, are those self-assessments or are those outside assessments?
Yeah. So the
Sorry, I didn't hear.
oh, the bridge study that Kelly just had done is done by DM Ross.
Okay.
As is the road study. They've also completed that. The storm sewer work, the camera work, basically Don and his men are doing that camera work, and then they work with here in Geomatics on that as well. And then the sidewalks and stuff, that was in the road study as well. So for the most part, and all of that has been done by outside except for the utility.
Okay, well, that's good. Thank you.
Archie?
No, I just wanted for clarification, because my understanding around the question around infrastructure in other municipalities is that the user pays 1.5 times and the half goes towards the upkeep. But I don't think we have a current, unless I'm wrong, a current agreement right now where the municipality like Morris Turnberry or another neighboring, Central Huron would kick in for future capital contributions. As far as I recall, that's something we're in discussions about currently. Am I correct on that? Just so Trevor's clear.
That is my memory of it.
Okay.
That I know that it's been discussed, but I don't believe it's inked.
Okay, so let's make sure I'm understanding this. So if I've got a chunk of pipe from North Huron to Morris Turnberry, and there's 50% in Morris Turnberry and 50% in North Huron, we own it. North Huron owns it. We replace that $1 million. Are we sending a bill to Morris Turnberry for $500,000 or not?
Not yet.
So that's my question.
Yeah.
So if we're not, that's probably something that's an issue,
That,
in my opinion.
For us
one
as
thing
well.
council is trying to work on.
So yeah, so that's what I wanted to clarify, that's if that's not the case currently, then that would, as a ratepayer, that's an issue for me. Because I'm paying for something that I'm not using.
Yeah. Yes. And in fairness, that's an issue that we're discussing along
We're
with
working on that.
paying in lieu of taxes and things like that.
That's why we have a moratorium on
Just
new
until we
builds.
get it worked out.
Okay, thank you very much.
Any other questions or comments on clarification? Okay, I'll
Thanks.
call motion for adjournment. Vauden and Hallahan. All in favor? Carried.
Okay, thank you everyone.
Yeah, thank you everyone.